Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
I'm pleased to inform that for the afternoon lecture, we have with us Professor Sunetra Ramanan. She is an associate professor at IIT Madras. She got her PhD from Ohio State University. Her areas of interest include renormalization group approach, quantum dynamics, and nuclear structure. Ma'am, I thank you for taking time out of your hectic lecture to come enlighten us with your insightful knowledge. And everybody, please put your hands together for a warm round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, good afternoon, all of you. So, sorry? Yeah. It's very nice to talk to school children where a greeting comes back with enthusiasm. Okay, I'm so used to college students here. But anyhow, so what I want to do today is introduce you to the world of scientific programming. Okay, so I do theoretical physics. Okay, so I'm a nuclear theorist. So almost any calculation that I do, I can only do so much on pen and paper, using pen and paper. At some point, the equations become so complicated that this has to be done on a machine. But now when you do things on a machine, you can immediately, ask how accurate will that be? Okay, so these are the kind of questions: what sort of accuracy you will have, what is acceptable accuracy, and what should you watch out for when you try to do any scientific computation using a computer. What should you watch out for? All right, that's what I'm going to try and highlight in this 1 hour. Okay, so I don't really care about how much I cover. It's more to give you an idea. So please ask me questions anytime you want to interrupt me. All right, feel free. All right. So just so that you have, if you have any questions, my email. If you have any questions, please, you may ask. Okay. Okay. So all of you are familiar with computers. This is the age where all of you are continuously connected to some device, and you might find it ridiculous that when I first saw a computer, I think the fastest machine I saw in 2000 was 256 MB RAM. Then that went up to a GB, and I was very, very happy because my programs ran faster. Now, of course, in my office, I have a 32 GB RAM machine. Okay, I'm just talking of the RAM, not the hard drive. Okay, which of course is 1 TB, 2 TB. So things are so easily available. All right. So now, the first thing I want to ask you is, what sort of restrictions am I talking about? Because as I said, you won't have to deal with a computer. So there is something ominous about a computer. So let's see what it presents to us. So normally when you see a chipset, okay, you have 32-bit chips, okay, and what does that mean? It means it's a word, correct? Which means any data that is stored is going to use 32 bits, all right? Now, of course, over the years you have seen remarkable, evolution in computers, all right? And but what one needs to remember is that the machine is finite. It is not like your human brain. It cannot do many things. It does precisely what you ask it to do. Okay? For example, okay, before we even talk about what this restriction that a word might offer, suppose I have, a number like this, 1 by 3. You know how to divide it. But a computer has to be told that, of course, it depends on the software you use, okay? Some of these modern things like Python will work the same way you work. But if you work with C or C++ or Fortran, then 1 by 3 will not cut it. It will give you 0. Why? Because it takes the numerator to be an integer, denominator to an integer, and the result will also be an integer. If you give the answer to a number which is real, then it will give you 0.00. Okay, it will not automatically do the integer, it will not do the conversion to real numbers immediately. You have to specify. You do that by just doing a 1 point, depending on what sort of, what language you use. Okay, so therefore there is always this language which is going to be some higher language with which you communicate to the machine. The machine works with ones and zeros at the end of the day, but the instructions that you give is in a human readable form, whatever that language might be. Okay, and as things advance and as you have better versions of languages and so on, you may have smarter languages. But at the end of the day, I always believe, after having done numerics since early 2000, maybe you people were not even born then, but since I know that the smartest person has to be you, never your machine. Because your code or anything that you use on a machine should be such that you know exactly what's happening. Only then it can be given to someone else to be used. Okay. So, so this was just a quick example. But now let's get back to what I said about what a word is. Okay. So typically one word uses 32 bits. Now, you may have, as things progress in your lifetime, you may see that double this amount is given to a word. No matter, it's still finite. 32 bits means 32 strings of 32 ones and zeros, which you have to use optimally. Alright? So, if I have an integer that I have to store here, one bit has to go into the sign of this number, because an integer can either be positive or negative. Right? So, one bit is used for the sign. So, one goes for sign. That means I have 31 bits. Okay. So how many, the range of numbers that I can have is anything from 0, if I don't count the sign, to 2 raised to 31, which is approximately this, 10 to the 9. Which means if I try to manipulate with any integer which is 10 to the 10, it's not going to be able to store it. It will give me random numbers, it would give me junk, I won't know where the error is. Okay, so simple things like the 1 by 3 I said, okay, or this limit really becomes a problem, because you know that 2 into 10 to the 9 is nothing. What is the Avogadro's number? Order of magnitude? 10 to the 23. Okay, so therefore for Avogadro number, you can't store it as an integer. Okay, even if you want order of magnitude, I can't say 6 into 10 to the 23. It makes no sense. I'll have to store it as a real number. Then it means, now for a real number, what does 32 bits mean for a real number? One bit goes into the sign of the number. Then how do you write it? You write it in what is called a scientific format, okay, which is usually some value before the exponent. I'm just calling it A dot some B, C, D, etc. Okay, in other words, any number. So I'm going to call a number this way. A number can be written, again, this depends on the IEEE standard, how this expansion is done, but let's assume an expansion and see what limitations it gives us. So suppose I take n to go from 1 to some capital N. Alright, then oh no, let me take it as 0. So then I'll have an 2 raised to minus n. Okay, which means no matter what the number is, I only have n plus 1 bits to store it. Okay, so therefore what is this expansion? Put n equal to 0, a0. Okay, n equal to 1, a1 by 2 plus a2 by 2 square plus etc. an by 2 raised to n. Okay. Now, there are some numbers which are called machine numbers. Why? Because when I convert them to binary, it only requires few bits. Give me an example. 3. 3 is what? 1, 1. So 0.3 is? That's all. So it requires finite bits, right? But not all numbers are like that. When I convert it from decimal to binary, it's an expansion in powers of 2. You'll have positive powers of 2, negative powers of 2. Here, of course, because we want for real numbers some general overall format, you take an expansion like this. This is called the scientific notation. So that once it exceeds this number of bits, you can always exponentiate. Okay? Now your the exponent may be positive or negative. You don't want to lose another bit there because you have to store the exponent. You have to store the mantissa, you have to store the sign, you have to store the exponent. So therefore, there is a way of, there is a neat trick to help you avoid losing an extra bit to the sign by what is known as an exponential field. So you just shift it. If it goes from some minus number to some plus number, you just shift it so that it goes from 0 to some positive number. And you can always recover your number because you just have to subtract this guy. Okay. And again, depending on the IEEE standard, what that number is, how much is allotted to it will matter. Okay. But no matter what, you see you only have a finite number of bits. Okay. Yeah. For the exponent. So there is an overall sign for the number. But if your number is very small, then there is certainly, you can't keep putting that many zeros. That's why you have a scientific notation, correct? So you will have something dot whatever into some 10 to the minus, say, yes. So what you do is, let's say 10 to the minus 13, okay, or something like that. So I have something like, let's say 3.1 into 10 to the minus 13. This 3.1 is going to be first converted to binary. Then you have the exponent, correct? So for the exponent, what you do, it's a negative exponent, which means I can store the exponent, whatever is the quantity in the exponent, I can store it in the computer using the same 32 bits. However, there is a minus sign, which means I will lose one more bit for the sign. So what is normally done is that's converted to a binary, but it's a negative binary. So you add some positive number to shift it. So there is always a limit to what you can have. So depending on, so let me tell you clearly. So suppose I decide to give 8 bits for the exponent only. Okay, 1 bit has gone into sign, 8 bits have gone into exponent, that is 9. So how many bits do you have for the mantissa? 23 bits, correct? But with 8 bits for the exponent, you can't cover the entire range of exponents. There is a limit. In the 8 bits, you can lose 1 bit for sign. I don't want to lose that. I want to get my maximum out of it. So what I will do, given 8 bits, I figure out what is the largest and the smallest number and I'll shift it. So once I know the largest number, I know that this largest number can be from minus to plus. Okay. So I shift it such that the smallest is 0 and the largest is whatever it is, when I have all the bits to be 1. 8 bits to be 1. So what is that? That is, if I have 1, 1, 1, all 8 bits are 1, what number will that be? Quickly calculate and say. Sorry? No. Is it 512? 128, I think. 128. So if you lose a bit, just check it. You will know it. So what is if I have all of them to be? Wait, we'll see, no? Why don't you convert and see? It's 128 or 256? 8. Yeah, 256, right? So if I lose 1 bit, it's going to bring it down to 128. I don't want that. Because my exponent, I want it to be 256. So what I will do, I'm going to add to minus 128, shift it so that it becomes 0. So that I release the extra bit. Okay, that is called the exponential field. So that allows me to have my 8 bits entirely for storing the magnitude. It is a magnitude. So if I have, so basically I am going to call my 0 not as 0 but minus 127. So I add, so 0 is minus 127 is immediately mapped to 0. It releases that extra bit for me. So I can go all the way to 256. So when I want to calculate the actual value, if you do that, then you can only go from minus 128 to plus 128. I don't want to do that. I want to get that extra bit because you want to get as much as possible. No, why? So 0, 0, 0 is the smallest number. No, well, it's by magnitude it's the smallest, but the maximum number I can have, if I have 7 bits, instead I want to have 8 bits. So therefore I want to have the largest number to be 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. All of them to be 1. Okay. So if I do that, okay, then I do not account for the sign, because your exponent can be positive or can be negative, because your exponent again requires finite number of bits to store it. So that's the reason I add something to, compensate for the negative numbers by saying that if my exponent is negative, I will just shift it to 0 and add that difference. That's all.
Without this, when we have 8 bits and we map it from minus to plus.
You won't map it from minus. That's the thing. You will map it from 0, which means your original number might have a negative exponent. So suppose it's a minus 16. I convert it to binary. Okay. And what I'm going to do, because it's negative, I'm going to shift the 0 to whatever was the 0 when I add this exponential field. So it's a number made so that the lowest negative number in the exponent is now shifted to 0. Lowest is shifted to 0. Not the, no. It's the lowest exponent. Because
It's the whole thing, then
then it is the same thing. Correct. I understand what you're saying. It is just the if I look at the exponent, I have to store that in 8 bits. Okay. Understand? So basically what I'm trying to do is, when I am having an exponent, I have to store 13 or 16 or whatever that number is with the sign. But I don't want to waste a bit for the sign. So what I'm going to do is ask myself, what is the largest, if I have 8 bits, what is the largest number I can have? That should be the largest negative number. If I lose one, then I'm going to have that one bit less. Now I will shift the 0 of all possible numbers in the exponent. So I'll add a quantity which will make sure that my lowest exponent is 0, whatever I give it. So that way I will save 1 bit. Otherwise you will lose a bit. Okay, but no matter what you do, you see, you always have a finite number. So this is a partition where I have told you that out of 32, 1 for the sign, 8 to store the exponent for a real number. Okay, then I have how many? So I have 22 or 23? 23. Yes, 23 for the mantissa. What does this mean? It means that this n stops at 23. Okay, the n stops at 23. Where will this come in? Of course, it will decide for you the largest and the smallest number. Okay, then it will also come in when you do manipulation. For example, if I want to add to 1 some number, I really care what that number is. If the number is as big as 1, there is no problem. But the smaller it becomes, I am certainly going to end up with a number so I'll tell you this. So let me do it again. So suppose I want to add, why is this so slow? So to 1, I want to add some epsilon. If epsilon is as big as 1, there is no problem. You can store it, because the largest number, if I use 32 bits, is about 10 to the minus 30. Smallest number is, largest is 10 to the plus 30 and the smallest is 10 to the minus 30. If you use double precision, which is, I don't know what double precision is, different languages will use it, it just doubles the word length. Then it will go to 10 to the minus 300 to 10 to the plus 300. Okay, these are your smallest and largest numbers. But no matter what, if I want to add a quantity to 1, I really have to worry about the relative magnitude. Okay, so suppose I add some epsilon. Okay, let epsilon be 1. I don't care. Start with 1. Then 1 plus 1 will be 2. Now in the next step, I am going to divide epsilon by half. So then to 1, I will add 1 plus 0.5. It will be 1.5. Then I take this 0.5 and divide it further by 2. Then it will be 1.25. And so on. So continuously divided by 1. At some point, you will end up with an epsilon, which is so small that all these expansion coefficients are 0 except the last one. And that is the smallest epsilon you can add. Because after that, your answer will be 1 only. It will not be different from 1. Because if you add to 1 an epsilon which is positive, you have to get a number bigger than 1. But because you only have finite storage in mantissa and your n is 10 to the 23, the smallest epsilon you can add is, so the epsilon, the smallest, okay, the smallest epsilon is 1 over 2 raised to 23, which is approximately 10 to the minus 7 in decimals. So, you see, when you do manipulation, where you take one number and you add another number, this is just addition. This is going to play a very important role. Similarly, when you take two numbers, A is a number and B is a real number. I want to form a number C, which is A minus B. Okay? If A and B are different, there is no problem, because the difference between them is large enough for me to have enough number of significant bits in the mantissa. However, if A and B become very close to each other, what will be the difference? The smallest difference I can have is the 1 over 2 to the 23, 10 to the minus 7, because anything smaller than that, all my A's will be 0. Okay, I can't store it. If the computer cannot store it, sometimes it will just return to you some junk number. It may not even be the number. You won't even know where the problem is. So you really have to worry when in an algorithm and, sorry? The first, why? Because you have taken n to be 0. Yes, I agree. It only has to be because you are going to use the entire thing. So it can only be 22. I agree with you. Unless I go to a scheme where n goes with 1, then it will be 23. I agree. So n has to be 22 here. Okay, this is not very right. Yeah. So let me write here. So for this, n is 22 because everything goes into the mantissa. I agree. So but anyhow, 10 to the 23, 10 to the 22 roughly is going to be this. There's not going to make much difference here. All right. So this is what happens. So, and these are not very, these are not some high level manipulation. These are very basic manipulation. Addition, subtraction. Okay. And you see, no matter what you do, there is always going to be an error that is introduced because you only have finite size. Now, how do you do scientific computing with something like this? And that's what I want to get to. Okay. As a first example, let us see a very simple case where I want to sum the following series. I know all of you will know the answer to this. What will it give you? If you sum, can you even sum it? Will it give you a finite number? What is the number? Pi squared by 6. Right? There are so many different ways to do it. Okay, you can sum this series. Now what I want to do, I want to sum this series on a computer. What answer do you expect? I expect it to be pi squared by 6. But what happens to infinity first? Can I sum it all the way to infinity? No. It's going to be to some n, capital N. Alright. So on a computer, or the computer version is this sum. So let's call this S. This first becomes Sn because it's determined by n. Okay. And n goes from 1 to n, 1 over n square. My simple intuition tells me I don't have to go all the way to infinity, but I keep increasing n. At some point, it will be equal to pi square by 6. And we have to find out what that n is. We can do that. It's a simple program. You have to add it. Okay. You can figure it out. Now, I also know that n is an integer. Okay. Already it tells me that I cannot have capital N anything bigger than what? I can't, n square cannot, 1 over, n square cannot be bigger than 10 to the 9. So 10 to the 4, 10 to the 5 is at best what I can use for n. So that n square is going to be less than 10 to the 9 because it can't compute n square. Okay. But I can circumvent it. How? I will just write this as sum n equal 1 to n, 1 over n into 1 over n. Now n can be 10 to the 9, 10 to the 8 also, but not more than that. Okay, 10 to the 8, 10 to the 9 roughly. So it has to be less than. So roughly let's say 10 to the 8. I can safely go to that. So you see, for even something as simple as this, one has to think at every stage how one can optimally change the algorithm. This is how you get an algorithm. Okay, you want to work with a computer and you have to make it give you the right answer. Okay, so this is what happens. Now my next question, should it matter whether you sum up or sum down? What is summing up? To 1 you add 1 plus 1 over 4 plus 1 over 16 and so on. Should you do that? Or sorry, 1 over 8, 1 over 16 and so on. Or should you sum down, which means from n reverse the sum? Do you think it should matter? Yes, no, what do you think? So summing up means what? So let's call it S up is 1 plus n equal to 1, 2 square plus 1 over 2 cube plus etc. 1 over 2 to the n. Alright, what is sum down? Reverse it. Now, honestly, you know that it shouldn't matter. If the computer were you, it wouldn't matter at all. Okay, that is sum up. But I can also do what is called sum down. Let me erase this. Yeah. Sorry? N is 1. Oh, because I was thinking of binary. I'm sorry. N is 1, N is 2, N is 3. Sorry. Yeah. I was wondering why is it looking like a binomial expansion. N square. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Alright. So that is sum up. For sum down, what do? Just change this. So I will do 1 over n square plus 1 over n minus 1 square plus etc. 1 over 2 square plus 1, because n equal to 1, it is 1. Okay, this is sum down, which is just do it the reverse way, which means I will have some loop in the first case which will start with 1 and go to n. In the second case, it will start with n and go down to 1. Okay. In normal human mathematics, it won't change. Yeah? Question? Yeah.
So he asked why 1 by n into 1 by 3. I told each will get 32.
Each will get 32. And then you multiply. So first you have to store it, right? Actually, you know what? To be very honest, today morning I was trying this and I found that it was not working if I took a 1 by n square. So I said, okay, let's do 1 by n into 1 by n. And then I realized that yes, it matters. So small things matter. Okay. So now you see, you can do it this way. Yeah.
How did we multiply the 2? How would that be?
That will, so with the multiplication also.
Mapping will go.
Yes, no. So now you see each of this n, I can store it as a real number or as an integer. This first of 10 to the 9 is only if I keep it as an integer. I can always declare it as a real number. Then I can increase the n. Okay. And if I do 1 by n, it is going to be stored as a real number. If I don't store it as a real number, it will be 0. Correct? For example, if I have the second term, it is 1 over 4. Correct? I have to say it is 1 point over 4 or use some higher level language which will automatically read it and take care of it. Okay? So therefore, you see, I have to be careful in making sure that I have 1 over 4 added.
Also get 1.0 into 10 power whatever and then we could do even.
Which one? I can. So if you want to increase what you can do with this series,
1.0 into
yes, you can. So there are so many ways in which you can increase how far you go with this series. But let's do the simpler one, because what I'm interested in is to show you where it fails. For example, if I store everything as a double precision, as a double real but double precision, which means I get 64 bits, you won't even see this problem. Okay? But if I store it, if I make everything as a single precision number, which means I only use 32 bits, keep n as an integer, then the problem I want you to see will come up. Okay? So what is the difference between summing up and summing down? When you sum up to 1, you add smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller numbers. So at some point, the fact that to 1 you cannot keep adding small numbers is going to come up. This way what will happen? You already start with a small number, you add to it something of comparable magnitude, then to the answer which will also be of comparable magnitude, you add another small number. So you build up your number, okay, by starting with a small number and adding to it smaller numbers. Alright?
So if we have a limitation on the lower end, we will know this.
That certainly. In fact, you will know that the limitation you will see by varying capital N. Okay, I will show you what you will get. Okay, that you will get by varying capital N, because after all, no matter what, it has to go to capital N. Exactly. But yes, I understand. So when you do sum down, if I print out in the loop every value that is being summed, you will see this error right in the beginning. Whereas there you will have 1 and then you're adding to it smaller and smaller numbers, so you will get to it only in the end. But before that, this 1 plus whatever will saturate, it will no longer change, right? Because I'm adding to 1 which is large, of order 1, smaller and smaller and smaller numbers. So I can already guess that this should work better on a computer, and that's what I'm going to show you. Okay, so here oops. So where have I got it? No. Yeah. So in this, you have the squares here, right? So the red squares are the error I get when I sum up. How do I calculate the error? I know the exact answer. If I sum to n terms, I know the partial sum. Correct? So then I can calculate what is called error, or in this case I should be specific and call it relative error, as Sn minus S divided by S.
And we provide hard-coded values.
Yeah, S I know, it's pi square by 6. So you provide that. You do Sn, which is partial sum, which is sum to n terms. Then find out this error. And look at this error as a function of capital N, which is the total number of terms you're going to retain in your series. It cannot be infinity. It has to be less than infinity. So that's what I'm going to do. Alright. So now you see, I start with 10 and I seem to increase it in steps of 5. So I did a multiplication by 5. Okay. So you see the errors, both of them, they are identical. I'll show you the numbers also. They are identical. It starts to fall down. At some point, the down sum, summing down, which is start from capital N and go down to 1, it seems to further decrease the error compared to the other guy which saturates. Okay. Why does it saturate? Because you're adding to 1 smaller and smaller and smaller numbers. So at some point, it won't be able to make a difference between the n minus 1 and the nth and the n plus whatever that I have added. Okay. So this tells you that you really have to pay attention to how you are going to do the algorithm. Okay. And these are examples which are not very sophisticated. They are very, very small. They are very basic. And you see, and you get errors that come up even in the way you do it. And that's what I want to highlight first. So is this clear? So I'll show you actually the numbers that I had for this. It's very nice to see, and the code. Yeah.
How is 1 minus pi square by 6 pi square by 6 the same as point?
What is 1 minus pi square? How did you get?
It will be 1 when we are doing after.
I didn't start with 1. I started with 10. So there the error will be terrible, no? It will be bigger than 1.
And for the first 1 by n square, it will be very small compared to pi square.
Which one?
1 by n square.
Yes, I agree. But I calculate the error after I sum.
First n square.
First n. So suppose I had kept my n as 1. Then up and down will give me the same. Up and down will give me the, will it give me the same? No, if I kept my capital N as 1, that's it. It will give me the same number. And that has to be order 1 error, because I'm looking at relative error. It is order 1, which means I've not even got my first digit correctly. Alright. Then I increase my n to 2. If I increase it to 2, then for the first one it will be 1 plus 1 by 4 and the other one it will be 1 by 4 plus 1. Okay, that's all. Again, there can't be much difference. Then you increase your n to 3, then it will be either the first 3 terms or 1 by 3 square plus 1 by 2 square plus 1 and so on. And as you see, it doesn't make a difference. So I have started with 10, then I think I did 50 and then 500 and I increase by n by multiplying by a factor of 5. I can also multiply by factors of 10. Doesn't matter how I increase, okay? So I just wanted more points. So you see, it's identical till you come to something like this. This is what? This is of order some 5,000 or something like that. After that, the up sum saturates. So the errors don't change. If you see the numbers, it's very close to pi square by 6. But you see the error. The error is of order 10 to the minus 4. Whereas the other guy, the error goes on decreasing, the relative error. Which means it's able to do the sum much better. Okay, and at this point, I think at some point it gets it exactly to whatever is the precision. And the precision is given by what? The smallest entry that you have in the mantissa, which is 1 over 2 power 22, if it is single precision. If it is double precision, it is some other number. Okay, so roughly it translates to 10 to the minus 7 or 10 to the minus 16. That's about it. Okay, so now I'll show you the actual numbers.